For those of you who have just hopped on, I'm Sonja Durr. I'm the founder and owner of Bridge Performance Coaching. And our main product that we offer is called CoachCruiting, which is a unique blend of strategic staff-based coaching paired with targeted recruiting. We are really looking strongly at culture and making sure that we have the best fit to fit within the culture of your organization when we're hiring. So our mission.
Wait.
Am
Sonja,
I, was I?
you're muted. Yeah, you were muted, sorry.
Okay. What do I need to repeat? Anything?
Yeah, just start with your mission. I apologize.
That's okay. So the mission of my business is best person equals best performance equals best overall result. So without further ado, we're going to jump into our presentation. So let's first take a look at recruiting versus CoachCruiting. What are the differences? And basically, it's just much more in depth looking at the team and the dynamics of the team in order to make sure that we're attracting the best talent to your organization. So we're going to focus in first of all on what does it take to really attract great talent to your organization. So you want to kind of be thinking about what does your business, what does your organization look like from the outside? In other words, ask yourself, why would somebody want to come and work for you or with your organization? What are you putting out there on your website and even in your job ads? Because it should be reflective of, you know, what those selling points that the great candidates are actually looking for. Candidates are smart shoppers, and definitely before COVID hit, it was an employee's market. And it really still is when you're thinking about the great talent. Those that really know they have choices still have choices, even in this job market. So really keeping in mind whether or not you have an appealing website, a positive social media presence, solid customer reviews, and a comprehensive benefits package, which Kimberly will talk about quite a bit later in the presentation. But before we go any further, what I'd like to do is do a little poll. You're going to see a poll come up on your screen. Does everybody see that? And if you would go ahead and vote on.
I don't think we can. Everyone.
Can everyone see it?
No.
Okay. How about now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and cast your vote. Okay. Overwhelming winner coming through. Couple more votes still to come in. It's evening out a little bit more now. Okay, those of you who haven't voted, you want to put in your response? Okay, we're almost there. And we have a tie actually for our top two. Okay, I'm gonna go with this and share the results. Okay, so you can see we have a tie actually for defining your specific staff needs and then finding time. But our winner is fear of hiring the wrong person. So So I think we're gonna be able to address all of these things in our presentation today. But again, if at any time you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and Kimberly will either stop me and we'll answer them in real time, or we'll save them to the end and address them then. So let's jump in and talk about this, why it's so difficult to hire and what are the considerations that we're thinking about when we're looking to attract a great talent. So where I want to start, where I feel is the most important place to start, what I talk to every business owner that I work with about first and foremost is culture. And culture is so much more than a buzzword in the business community. It's really a defining factor for everything, all decisions that you make. And so when we look at culture, we want to break it down into 4 basic areas. Because it's the backbone of your business, it's what makes you unique. It's what defines you, and it should be what shapes all of your decisions, especially those when it comes to employee optimization. So the first component of culture then is vision. So really painting that picture of what the future of your business looks like. And just a quick note on vision for business owners who might be here today. Vision very well may have had to pivot or shift this year because of everything that we've dealt with. So it may be worth revisiting in this fourth quarter as you prepare to go into 2021 and think about your goals for 2021. Really looking at, did the vision have to move? Does it have to be reworded or recrafted a little bit to embrace the business pivots and shifts that we've had to make this year? And then along with vision always comes mission, your purpose and reason for existing, and making sure that you're really able to articulate that clearly and that your staff is well aware of what these things are for you. And then we get to core values. And this is something that I'm very, very passionate about. Core values should not have shifted in any way, shape, or form. They are the things that define what your organization is and what it's not. And they should definitely be dictating any hiring and firing decisions that are made. And then the last piece of this is organizational structure, which I'm going to talk about in the second part of the presentation. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is basically looking at how your team is structured now and where you want it to be as you look forward to fulfilling your vision. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. And another important thing to really keep in mind when attracting great talent is defining the position. And this was part of what we looked at on the poll. The better picture you have in advance of the person that you want to bring on board or the people that you want to bring on board, the better chance you have of actually getting that right person. I know we talked about in the poll, there's a lot of fear. How do we get that right person? Well, the more you can define it up front, the better chances that you have. So things to consider: what is the person's background that you really need them to have? Skill set. I'm a big proponent that lots of times skill set can be taught. I'm much more of a proponent of looking for those soft skills as a fit. But obviously, if it's a specific type of job that you need them to have a very specific skill set for, then that's an important consideration. What's their track record? That's one of the first things I look at when I review a resume. How long has this person stayed in their jobs? When we're looking at attracting great talent, we're not looking at job hoppers. We're looking for people who want to commit to being part of the team for a season of their lives and really growing with it. Location. What geographical location are you willing to consider? Is this a remote position and that doesn't matter as much? Or is it someone who's coming to the office and you want the commute to be reasonable? You can see all of these things are just really important for you to think through as you're considering what it takes to attract great talent. Okay, and then next we need to look at process. And again, this is something that I'm really a stickler about. I'm really passionate about, is making sure that this is just an example of a process. But when I am hiring for a business, I use the same process every time with every candidate. It's super important because you want to know that you ask the same questions in the initial interview with one candidate as you did with the other candidate. You want to know that you ask the references the same questions. You want to make sure that you're collecting the exact same information as much as possible for each of the candidates, so that at the end of the day, you're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. Okay. And then, so Steve Jobs, this quote from him is very, very timely for this presentation. Hiring the best is your most important task. Absolutely. If we don't have a great team, we don't have a great business. It's representative of who we are in every way, shape, and form. So when you're making these hiring decisions, I would highly encourage you to seek input. And that can look a lot of different ways. It can be seeking input from other people on your team. Oftentimes when I'm down to the last few candidates and we're bringing them in for in-person interviews, I'll ask the owner if I can pull in a key person on the team who's going to have a lot of interaction with this person that we're bringing on, because I want to observe that interaction. I want to see how the team members receive this person and vice versa. So that's one place you can seek input. You can also seek input from peers, or maybe you have an advisor like a regional director that you can look to for input. Or you can have an outside recruiter like what I do, and making sure that as you're thinking through this process that you've really considered all of the variables in order to have the best chances to choose that right person to complete your team. Okay, so now we're going to move into, once you've got these great people on your team, once you've made the hire, then how do you actually keep them? So several things that I want to address here. And the first one is the importance of knowing your team. Employees want to be known, and they want to be recognized for the value that each one of them brings to the team. And it only benefits you as the business owner or hiring manager to know each person's personality and their strengths. So where they fit best in order to optimize performance on your team. So there are many assessment tools out there that you can use. And again, I'm going to save that because I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the second part of my presentation. But find a way to really know your team and the strengths that they represent, each one of them represents. And then next, I would say adopting a growth mindset and a willingness to embrace change. Again, those great candidates, they are looking for an organization that is not stagnant. They want one that it has a future mindset, a mindset for growth and adaptability and creativity. And also a willingness to embrace change. And for those of us who are business owners here today, if we didn't have a willingness to embrace change in this year, then we're probably really, really struggling at this point. There's a statistic out there that a little less than 75% of the population would consider themselves to be change resistant. So we need to know ourselves, and we need to know if this is an issue, for us as business owners or hiring managers, and really work on that, because those people that are the great talent out there want to know that we're going to adapt and we're going to change with whatever the demands are that are placed on our business. And then the next thing I would want to talk about would be communication, and making sure that you are being really clear about your expectations. So I already mentioned to you that I have a very specific hiring process that I use, and that I ask all the same questions. So I'm collecting the same information. And one of the questions I ask in every interview that I conduct is, what are you looking for in an ideal boss? And I get varied responses to that question, but two of the responses I almost always get are that they are looking for consistent, open communication, and that they want to know clearly what their expectations are. So, huge proponent of that in retaining great talent. And next would be making sure that you address issues in a timely manner. Again, if you've got a great person on your team and they're performing well, but they've got somebody sitting at the next desk who is lazy or is getting away with something and it's not being addressed, that is a huge frustration for a great employee, and it will wear on them. So making sure that you have some sort of an assessment process, which we'll look at also later in the presentation, that is allowing you to evaluate people on a regular basis to make sure that everybody is performing well. And when somebody is not, being willing to address it, being willing to take action, whatever that means, talking to them the first time, second time, maybe there's a performance improvement plan. Beyond that, they probably are not a great fit for your team. And that great person on your team needs to see that you will address it in a timely way. And then lastly, I would say the importance of celebrating success with your team cannot be understated. Again, great employees want to know that they're valued. They want to know that they're doing well. They want to be part of a team that is working together. So any opportunity you have to celebrate success is a great opportunity. And this doesn't have to be expensive. There are great little incentivizing programs you can do out there. You can do a pizza lunch, whatever it may be, but take the time to celebrate the successes on your team. Okay, so I think at this point, I'm going to be turning it over to Kimberly, and she's going to talk to us about onboarding.
Great. Thank you, Sonja. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to share my screen now. Awesome. And those points that she shared are very, very important. It's important to understand what you're looking for when you get that person. But when you get that person, there are things that you have to do with them. Finding them and identifying who they are is the first step. The next step is integrating them into your organization. And that starts with onboarding. But before we dive into the topic of onboarding, I want to, ask two questions. The first is, what is onboarding? And the second is, why is it important? And as we think about that, we can, it will set the context for our onboarding conversation, because onboarding is a process. It's not the same as new hire orientation. New hire orientation is a part of onboarding, but new hire orientation is an event. It's typically a day or two, but it's not the full totality of what onboarding truly is. So onboarding as a process is the process of integrating new team members into a business and helping them do a few things. You're helping them learn the company's mission, goal, and history. You're helping them with learning their job responsibilities and giving them the appropriate training to be successful in their job. You're helping them to understand the landscape of the business. Who do I go to for questions? How do I get feedback? Who do I talk to about concerns, and who do I give feedback to? And it also helps them to understand what is expected of them as far as their schedule, communication, their commitments. And even though it can include some, paperwork, really the onboarding process is an ongoing process that consists of multiple elements. So the three elements of a successful onboarding process are here, but the reality is that I can't tell you, this is what you need to have for your onboarding process. This is what you need to do, because there is no clear-cut formula for success for an onboarding. Onboarding programs vary by organization, by size, by culture. So what we want to do here is really outline what the elements should be. So the first element is operational. You want to make sure that your new employees have the right material and knowledge to do their job. They need clarity on the business jargon. So you all know that we all have organizations that have acronyms, and we speak in acronyms, we speak in things that are specific to the company. We want to make sure that we let people know what those are. I talk to clients all the time and they're saying, they're using an acronym and I'm like, I don't know what that is. What is that? So when a new employee comes in, they don't know either. So you want to make sure that you're helping them understand it, whether it's to give them a list of common acronyms. I've seen some organizations kind of almost have a glossary so that they can help acclimate people to the environment. You also want to think about the social element of onboarding. Have you ever gone to a new company on your first day? They show you to your desk, they tell you, here, read all these papers, and then we'll come back and check on you. You don't know the people who are around you. You don't know anything about the organization. You really haven't been, brought into the organization in a way that makes you feel like you're a part of it. So that you want to make sure that you, as a manager and as an employer, that you make the employees feel welcome, that you help to help them build valuable relationships with their colleagues as they go throughout their journey as an employee, particularly in the first few weeks of them being in the organization. And then the last element of a successful onboarding is the strategic element. You want to make sure that the people in the organization that are coming into your organization understand your structure, your vision, mission, values, and culture. Those things are really important. They need to understand more than just their functional part of their job. Yes, if I come in and I am making widgets, that's fine. But I need to understand, where does my widget go? And then from there, how does that fit into the larger picture? People need to understand the totality of the organization and how their role fits into it. And giving them that context can help them be more successful, because if they only have that tunnel view of their little piece of the puzzle, they cannot be innovative. They can't offer, hey, I thought about this and maybe my role can help with that. So it's important to think about these elements as you're building out your onboarding process. So some best practices to consider within that is, well, I was supposed to give you a poll and I didn't do that. So let me launch, let me launch my poll. Yeah, so for whatever reason, I am not able to do that from this screen. Here I am. I'm going to launch my poll, which already has the answers on it, but that's okay. So from onboarding, when should onboarding start? All right, so yes, and I did put the answer up, so hopefully you knew this anyway, but immediately after they accept the offer, that's when onboarding should start, absolutely. So we want to make sure that we are starting that process very early on for them. And we want to think about that experience. We don't want to fall into the trap of thinking that we can't start it until their first day of work. There are things that people want to know. They're excited. This is their new job. They really are, wanting to think about how can they be successful and, how do they get involved quickly. And you want to keep them engaged as they are preparing and anticipating to go into that new job. So there's a lot of technology now that we have that can get people connected and help them, understand what's going on with the organization. There are some organizations that have amazing social media and they're doing a lot of great things. And so thinking about how can you start to incorporate some of the things that people may want to know as they get started, preparing for their new job. The other thing to think about is onboarding does not just belong to HR. I know that people think about onboarding and they think HR. I will tell you again, as we talked about in our last slide, new hire orientation, which is a part of onboarding, many times does belong with HR because it's the paperwork. It's the, let's get the necessities out of the way. But it's important for managers and leaders in the organization to understand that onboarding belongs to many people in the organization, not just HR. as a hiring manager, you want to potentially think about how you can reach out to that person. A lot of times HR is doing the offer letter and they're sending out the communication and the person accepts the job, hooray. But as a hiring manager, have you ever just emailed that person and said, hey, I heard you accepted the offer. That's awesome. I'm looking forward to, having you on the team. Let me introduce you to a couple of your team members just to get that social interaction started, which is one of the elements of successful onboarding, and to also let that person know that you're excited that they're going to be joining the team, or the hiring manager if it's not you. You want to make sure that as you are bringing that person on, when they do come in, that you are scheduling regular touch points throughout the day during their first few days. Not just sitting them down and taking them to lunch and then sitting them at their desk, but regular touch point meetings. At a minimum, having the bookend meetings, which is, hey, let's have a quick session in the morning, a quick session in the afternoon to see what questions you've had, if you need any additional support. But even throughout the day, having those conversations as well. And if you are an organization that, hasn't quite adapted to starting the onboarding prior to the first day, you want to make sure that on that first day, you are prepared and you have as much ready for them as possible. Thinking about welcome gifts and, just having those things available to them. And, of course, getting the housekeeping and the essentials done when they come in, telling them, well, for me, the most important thing is coffee. I think all of you know that. If you know me, I absolutely need to know where the coffee is first. Even though I'm a coffee snob, so I probably have my own coffee, but, letting people know where's the coffee, where's the break room, where's, the restrooms, where can they find a variety of things, making sure that they have those things and that they understand them and they know where their resources are. And then just think about some of the, the little things. How do they, access the company directory? Who's who do you speak to for these things? And, when you take people around and you're giving them all this information and throwing it at them, sometimes it's overwhelming. So maybe even giving them a little cheat sheet so that they can have that available to them so that they can refer to it in the future. Again, the social aspect is so important. So, making sure that they have a way to connect with people and, maybe even having, a little networking session so that they can get to know people across departments and within their department so that they don't feel so, like I'm just the new kid on the block. I don't know anybody. They just know I'm the new person. Just really trying to be creative about how you can socially involve people in that process. Then again, making sure they have all their equipment, making sure they have everything that they need on their first day. Maybe a mug, a pencil. If you, I know a couple of organizations have logo shirts and, a variety of things, having that for them so they can start to feel like they're a part of the team from day one. It's also important to make sure that you are discussing their goals with them. And that they are understanding from the beginning what is going to be expected of them. And then finally, you want to make sure that you're involving the senior leaders. You don't just want to have them going around talking to just the people on their team. Make sure that the owner, the president, the leadership team either comes and welcomes them. And if they can't do that, potentially have some type of video or something that's prepared that can help them feel like they have, that they are connected to leadership. Finally, don't give up too soon. Make sure that they are a good fit. And interestingly, Amazon has a program where they do a very intensive onboarding program. And the onboarding program is about 5 weeks. And at the end of that, they offer a $2,000 kind of it didn't work for me option for that person. So if the person feels like it wasn't a good fit for them, they'll offer them $2,000. And then they'll tell them, we'll pay you to quit, but we hope that you don't. So I know that some of you may not be able to offer $2,000 for people to quit, but it's really to make sure that, that process that they went through, the onboarding process, gave that person what they needed, and they felt like they were prepared to go into their to continue their role within the organization. You want to gather feedback, ask people, what did you what did we do well in this onboarding process? What would you have done differently? What did you need that you didn't get, so that you can constantly improve your onboarding process, so that you're constantly making sure that you're filling in those gaps, because sometimes, because we haven't been a new hire in a long time in the organization, we don't know what people might need. And then you want to offer redos. So that means that sometimes when you've been with an organization for a long time, there are some basics that you don't always remember, or it might be a little bit down the road and maybe I might need a refresher. So always make the availability to get that refreshed information from an orientation and onboarding perspective available to everyone in the organization. So that is, that's the information about, really the best practices in onboarding. And before I send you out into your breakout sessions, I want to give you some statistics about how a successful onboarding program can positively impact employee performance. So you'll see on this slide, there are a few statistics that onboarding has a direct impact on the productivity of new employees. It says that organizations with a standard onboarding process experience 54% greater new hire productivity. Again, that's having one with the various elements, not just necessarily filling out new hire paperwork and throwing someone into their job, but really having those full integrated elements of an onboarding process. Employees with companies with longer training programs as a part of onboarding, they gain full proficiency up to 4 months faster. So again, having that integrated onboarding process ongoing with training and building out those elements. Employees who experienced onboarding programs were more successful at meeting their targets than those that did not go through a formal onboarding process. 77% of employees who went through an onboarding program do well and meet their goals by their first performance review. And almost half of new hires who do not go through a formal training do not hit the required milestone. And then finally, successful onboarding programs help guide new hires step by step through learning all that comes with the job. So there are some direct benefits to improved employee performance, to having a solid onboarding process. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Sonja, and she's going to talk about G.W.C. Yeah.
Hopefully. Okay, perfect. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Well, welcome back. I hope you all, the room that I was in, we were having some great discussions about onboarding. So hopefully everybody experienced that in their breakout room. Okay, so we're gonna shift back to another part of the conversation, and we're going to be talking now about a specific tool that you can use to evaluate and make sure that you're holding people accountable for their performance on your team. So I want to start off by talking a little bit about, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Jim Collins. He's the author of the bestseller Good to Great. And in that book, he talks about several things, but his big focus was doing a survey of many top known companies where he was trying to determine which of those companies, what were the determining factors for a company to move from the status of good to that of great. And one of the things he really focused in on in this book was making sure that you have the right people on the bus, that the wrong people are off the bus. So kind of what we were talking about earlier, making sure that you take action when you've determined that somebody is on your team that doesn't belong there for whatever reason. And then finally, making sure that you've got the right people in the right seats or in the right positions on your team. So when we look at best people in the right positions, lots of things to consider here. So first and foremost, we want to look at making sure, and we talked about this a little bit earlier when we looked at culture, knowing the strengths of the people that you have on your current team. And that's revisiting all of those culture things we talked about, the vision, the mission, the core values, and then organizational structure, making sure that you have defined those business needs so that you know what all strengths you need to have represented on your team at any given time and how that needs to shift and change as your business grows and moves forward. And then knowing your staff team. And I told you earlier, I would talk a little bit more about specific strengths assessments. I would highly, highly recommend using some sort of a strengths assessment tool. There are many of them out there. I'm sure all of you have heard of several different types of assessment tools. I have one that I use with my business. I particularly like it for the workplace. I'd be happy to talk to any of you about it afterward. But utilizing some sort of a consistent strengths tool that everybody on your team takes and that you have the results from, I would highly recommend that, because that just helps you to know if you currently have people in the right places, on your team, but also to really keep in mind strategically how you might be able to train or develop somebody to move them into another seat that you have defined for down the road. Um, and just back to the assessment tool for a second, it's a great activity for your team. If you have the funds, if you have the opportunity between now and the end of the year, as you're kind of launching your goals and your plan for 2021, this has been a tough year. I'm sure it's taken a toll on all of you, and it absolutely has taken a toll on the people that are on your teams. So if you wanted to do some sort of a team exercise where you did a strengths assessment tool sharing, it's just a great experience. When I've had the opportunity to facilitate that kind of thing with a team, it provides invaluable information for the business owner, and it's a great experience for all the team members. First of all, they feel like their boss has invested in them by doing something like that, and they learn a lot about each other. So it goes a long way to alleviate communication issues, communication breakdowns, minor frustrations that tend to build in the day-to-day. So anyway, some sort of an assessment tool, and ideally having something like that you could do within a team environment is a great idea when you're looking at making sure they have the best people in the right positions. And then looking at balanced diversification, making sure that you set organizational structural goals now, a year from now, what you want it to look like 3 years from now and 5 years from now, so that again, you're strategically thinking about how you're going to be moving people around or developing people to make sure that you don't end up with performance gaps. And that leads us to the next point. Very important to have some sort of a tool to regularly assess how people are performing within your organization. And so one of the first things I do when I work with a new business is I talk with all of the people on the team first. I mean, obviously I have an initial conversation with the business owner, but I talk with all the people on the team because I want to get a sense. What is the culture really like here? Because oftentimes the business owner thinks it's one way, but they're so busy working in the business that it's hard to take that step back and really assess what things are really like for the employees. So I ask the employees, I say, what do you feel is working well? What do you feel are areas for improvement? How would you describe the culture and the core values here? And how would you describe the leadership? And I assure the employees that I'm not going to go back to their owner and say that Jim or Sally said X, but I'm going to give an overall summary. And then I sit with the business owner and we talk about a lot of these kinds of things on a larger scale, and we compare notes. And it becomes really easy to see any performance gaps that are currently there or any that could potentially develop. And that helps us then to shift people around, make sure that people are in the right positions, and then hire the best fit to complete the team. So what I want to talk to you about today is an example of an accountability tool that I could suggest to you. But before we do that, I'm going to launch another poll. Let me see if I'm able to do this. Okay, can you all see that poll?
Yes.
Okay, great. So go ahead and give me your feedback on what you currently use, if anything. Okay, I'll have almost everyone. A couple more votes to come in. Okay, we'll go ahead and go with this. So I'm going to end the polling so all of you can see. And what we came up with is that most people, 9 people, are using an annual evaluation tool. So that's great. At least something is happening on a fairly regular basis. And then we've got some irregular evaluations, some informal verbal evaluations that are also taking place. And only 1%, I'm sorry, 7%, one person is actually using some sort of a trackable tool. So I'd be interested in knowing afterward what that is. But okay, let me stop this and we're going to go ahead to the next slide. And I want to talk to you about a suggested evaluation tool called G.W.C. And I'll get into what those letters stand for. Kimberly was talking earlier about all sorts of acronyms that we don't know what they stand for. So I'll make sure I tell you what G.W.C. stands for. But first I want to let you know that this actually comes from the book Traction by Gino Wickman. And for any that are on this call, certainly who are business owners, or if you're regularly doing hiring, I would highly recommend this book. He developed a system called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. You may have heard it referred to as the EOS system. And a lot of great principles in that book. And so this particular tool is taken from that material. So when we look at the G.W.C. strategy, what do those letters stand for? We're looking at, do the people on our team get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? And asking these questions on a regular basis, asking these questions as you're bringing someone on board in the hiring process, and then asking them, like I said, on a regular basis thereafter. If we think about this year, for example, if we think about at the beginning of 2020, who could have imagined what the events of this year have brought? But if we think about it in terms of employees, there may be, and very well are, people on our teams who at the beginning of 2020, if we would have used this evaluation tool, we would have said, absolutely, they get it, they want it, and they have the capacity to do it. But that may be very different now because people's lives have been affected in many different ways. So you can kind of see the importance of doing this, asking these types of questions on a regular basis, so you're sure to have the best people in the right positions on your team. Okay, so let's talk about the G. When we think about, does a person get it? So here you're evaluating whether the employee exhibits a clear comprehension of the position. Do they understand everything that you're asking of them? But kind of what Kimberly was talking about earlier, do they get the whole vision? Do they get where you're trying to go? And then more importantly, do they get how their role fits in to the whole of the team? Do they get the big picture? So here a question you might ask yourself is, does this person have an intuitive sense and a natural ability to understand the position specific expectations? Okay, and then if we want to look at the W, I love this picture. But this one is really, really important. And you'll see the G and the W on this accountability tool are really more soft skills based than they are hard skills. But for the W, here's where you're evaluating whether the employee demonstrates a positive attitude and a motivation to complete the job with excellence every day, day in and day out. I mean, if you think about the people on your team and you think about times when maybe you've had somebody on the team who was just coming to collect a paycheck, that they really could have cared less whether they were working for your organization or the one down the street, it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference to the rest of your team. It makes a huge difference to you as the employer when you're looking at bottom line performance and overall results. And it makes a huge difference to your customers. You really want people on the team who want it. They want to be there and they're excited to be there. So here you're asking yourself, are they excited about your business and their role within? And then lastly, we might look at the C. And here is where we're focused a little bit more on the hard skills. Do they have the capacity to do what you're asking of them? And again, given the changes we've all had to deal with through 2020 with COVID and the pivots and shifts that we've had to make in our businesses, somebody may have been able to do what you were asking of them before, but now for whatever reason, maybe they have to be home with their kids, whatever it may be, they're not able to do what you need them to do at this point. So here you're evaluating whether the employee has all of the capabilities needed to perform the expectations of the role. And you're asking yourself, do they have the cognitive skills, the technical skills, the physical strength, if that's required, and the emotional intelligence to complete the job you're asking of them. So to wrap this up, having some sort of an accountability tool, whether it's G.W.C or it's another one, that you're regularly able to look back and say, you know, compared to 6 months ago, compared to a year ago, are the people still the best people to have in a particular position within the organization?
So it looks like everyone's back. So we'll just jump right in. So right before we went into the breakout session, Sonja gave us a good framework to really identify what are some, it's important to have a framework with which you're going to, manage expectations, set expectations, and assess whether or not people are the right person in the job. But determining whether the person is the right person for the job or in the right seat is one part of evaluating performance. The other is identifying where people need support and how you may be able to support them as it relates to the functional part of their job. Because, there's two pieces to being a successful employee. There's the, having that right attitude and being a culture fit. And then there's the ability to do the technical aspects of the job. And so, we have to be able to assess whether or not they're doing the technical aspects of the job in a meaningful way. So there, we have, if you ask people, what's their definition of, an effective performance evaluation, or why should we have performance evaluations? There will be a variety of things that they might be able to say. So what I would say is that while there might be varying philosophies on what the definition of an evaluation is, I think we all agree that it's important that we do performance evaluations and that we use some type of format to do it. While I'll say that there are some organizations that say, we're not doing a formal annual review anymore, we're just going to have touch point meetings, that's fine, as long as the communication is happening. So the elements of an effective performance evaluation program is, making sure that the feedback is continuous. That's one of the main things that you want to make sure of, is that the feedback is continuous and that it's not just once in a while, and that it's not just, sporadic, or you're just waiting until the end of the year. You want to make sure it's happening continuously. You want to make sure that that dialogue is two-way, because at the end of the day, it is a relationship, an employment relationship. And in a relationship, both people need to communicate with each other. And I think that many times as managers and as leaders, we forget about that. And so we want to make sure that people feel comfortable coming to us and talking to us, because as managers, we need feedback as well as we are providing them with feedback. We want to make sure that we're setting clear and specific goals around what we're expecting of them. And then we want to have a process for acknowledging any outcomes. So, whether it is the formal review, whether it's, pay for performance, bonuses for performance, just a clear way that we can identify outcomes. And again, the two-way interaction, having those set intervals for having that conversation. And again, I think that we all know that just waiting until the annual review to have the conversation is not the most effective way to manage performance. So some common review methods are the rating scale. The rating scale is the one that we know about. It's the most common one that people use. It's, you're a 3, you're a 5, you're a 1. It's really where you kind of rank it. But there are a couple of things I think we know about, some of the errors, where some managers haven't set really good goals. So they'll just say you're a 3 versus really taking the time to identify what it is that you're assessing for that person. The other thing is that many times when you're using a ratings scale, you're kind of just assessing whether the person is doing what's on their job description, which isn't really a clear indication of success in their ability to move forward in the organization or building them for that next opportunity. Whether they're doing what's on their job description, of course, they need to be doing what's on their job description, or they don't need to work there anymore. So we need to identify some ways to truly determine what success looks like and start moving the goalpost. So the rating scale sometimes doesn't do that, but it is a way to at least identify, what people are doing. The next thing that you can do is management by objectives. Management by objectives is a bit more interactive than the rating scale. The rating scale is set by the manager, it's set by the organization. They're the ones that are saying, these are the things that we want to measure you on. Management by objectives is where the two come together, the manager and the employee, and they set goals. They set what success looks like. They do that together. And then it becomes a little bit easier for them to say, yes, I hit this, or no, I didn't. However, when you're doing management by objectives, it's very important that you clearly outline what it is that you expect from the person, because if it's not well written and well documented, it can still become a bit subjective. Another method is 360 feedback. 360 feedback is when you get feedback from a variety of people, and typically you use software for this. I've seen it done by paper, but I will tell you, it was painful to look at when I saw someone do it by paper, but you can use software. And really you get feedback from clients, peers, managers. If you're a manager, the people that you manage, it kind of gives you a full 360 view of you and how you fit into the organization. And as long as, a good swath of people are selected, and as long as the questions that are being asked of the individual people are appropriate for their interaction with you and their level of interaction with you, it can give some good all around feedback for you. And then there's the self-evaluation. Typically, we see the self-evaluation used in conjunction with another tool like the rating system. So the self-evaluation is where the employee looks at themselves and kind of says, this is what I see for me. This is how I feel I've, contributed this year. But of course, we know that employees sometimes see themselves and see their role in the organization a little bit differently than you do. So it's good to get that feedback from the employee so that you can see how they view themselves and how they feel that they're contributing to the organization. But again, it's most effective when it's used alongside another tool. I'll also say that I've seen some organizations where they wait for the employee to evaluate themselves before the manager writes the review. I think that it is a bit more effective if the manager and the employee write their reviews separately without having seen the manager seen the employee in review, so that when the manager looks at the employee's review of themselves, they can do a bit of a gap analysis from this is how the employee sees themselves, this is how I see them. And then some of that review conversation can be, hey, I see that you feel you're here and I see you here. Let's put a plan together to make sure that we can get on the same page around where you really are. And then the last method that I would say is the critical incidents method. And that's where you're having very regular meetings and you're documenting any critical incidents that happen as they arrive. This method is the real-time feedback method. So that would be where but it requires a lot of steady documentation on the part of the manager. And if you're doing this method the way that you should, then you may not need the annual review every year, but definitely if you do have the annual review every year, none of the information in there is a surprise to the employee. So those are some of the common review methods. And what we want to leave you with is this visual. This is kind of a visual that outlines, what helps to create the culture that you want to have in your organization, recruiting the right people, onboarding them properly, identifying whether they are in the right seat and they're where they need to be, evaluating their technical skills. And then you'll see that there are some off ramps. You get to a point where you have an off ramp. Sometimes that off ramp is, I don't want to be here anymore. Sometimes that off ramp is, we don't want you to be here anymore. Sometimes it's, you're doing good and we're going to keep you. And sometimes it's, we're ready for you to go to the next level. But really, when you think about this visual, that's what that continuous cycle should look like. And then identifying which ramp is that individual going to take. So I know we have some questions and we only have a few minutes. So Sonja, if you wanted to help us with the questions.
Yeah, definitely. I have been kind of navigating them as they've come through. So hopefully some of them have been addressed, but the most recent one we have is from Kristen Wojan. Hi, Kristen. Great to have you here. And her question is, as many of us have shifted from live in-person training and onboarding events to virtual on-demand options, some of the special things we can do live have not translated well to virtual. For example, we used to have all of our new folks meet our owner and have a lunch together. Now we do not do this because of all of our training and onboarding is virtual. What are some examples of ideas and best practices you've seen other businesses are doing now to connect new hires to the CEO, president, owner? Kimberly, you want to tackle that one?
I'll have to give some thought to that because I'll be honest with you. I think that we are just now getting to the place where we're starting to think about just not being in survival, oh my goodness mode, and really trying to create real and meaningful experiences for people. There's been a lot of shift. So I don't know that I have a good answer for that, Kristen.
I would say, and I was addressing an earlier question from Jim, I would say that doing something is better than doing nothing. You're absolutely right. Of course, virtual is not gonna hold a candle to being in person, but thank God we have this technology, right? And we can utilize it to the best of our ability. And, what I'm trying to advise business owners to do is, as much as possible, to reproduce what you would do in person virtually. Bring everybody together, have a lunch. Maybe you do the, what is it called, grab and go, where you purchase lunch for everybody and everybody actually shares lunch together, but unfortunately in front of a screen, to have that meet and greet opportunity that you would have had in person before. Hope that helps. Any other questions? There's a comment. I just heard yesterday companies are still doing coffees and happy hours. Yeah, definitely.
Well, we want to be respectful of your time. We're going to follow up with you. We have a document that we created for you so that you can take some of this information and do some planning with your teams around a recruitment strategy, onboarding strategy, identifying whether you have the right people in the right seats, and the type of evaluation system that you should use. This one planning document will really help you outline how you can go about those things with your teams. We'll also edit this recording and make it available for you so that you can revisit this information that we've provided to you. Again, we greatly appreciate you sharing your morning with us. If you have questions, please email Sonja and I directly. But thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you all very much.